are now compelled to join the ranks of students in psychology, and follow their patrons into the broader field of mental therapeutics. There is no time for lingering, no time for skepticism or doubt or hesitation. He who lingers is lost, for the entire race is enlisted in the movement. I am aware of the fact that in connection with the matter we are now considering, there has been a great deal of foolishness during the past few years. Many absurd and foolish things have been claimed and done. But this is nothing against, and it has absolutely nothing to do with the great underlying laws themselves. The same has been true of the early days of practically every system of ethics or philosophy or religion the world has ever known. But as time has passed, these foolish, absurd things have fallen away, and the great eternal principles have stood out ever more and more clearly defined. I know personally of many cases where an entire and permanent cure has been effected, in some within a remarkably short period of time, through the operation of these forces. Some of them are cases that have been entirely given up by the regular practice, materia medica. We have numerous accounts of such cases in all times and in connection with all religions. And why should not the power of effecting such cures exist among us today? The power does exist, and it will be actualized in just the degree that we recognize the same great laws that were recognized in times past. One person may do a very great deal in connection with the healing of another, but this almost invariably implies cooperation on the part of the one who is thus treated. In the cures that Christ performed, he most always needed the cooperation of the one who appealed to him. His question almost invariably was, "Dost thou believe?" He thus stimulated into activity the life-giving forces within the one cured. If one is in a very weak condition, or if his nervous system is exhausted, or if his mind through the influence of disease is not so strong in its workings, it may be well for him for a time to seek the aid and cooperation of another. But it would be far better for such a one could he bring himself to a vital realization of the omnipotence of his own interior powers. One may cure another, but to be permanently healed one must do it himself. In this way another may be most valuable as a teacher, by bringing one to a clear realization of the power of the forces within. But in every case, in order to have a permanent cure, the work of the self is necessary. Christ's words were almost invariably, "Go and sin no more," or "Thy sins are forgiven thee," thus pointing out the one eternal and never-changing fact, that all disease and its consequent suffering is the direct or indirect result of the violation of law, either consciously or unconsciously, either intentionally or unintentionally. Suffering is designed to continue only so long as sin continues. Sin not necessarily in the theological, but always in the philosophical sense, though many times in the sense of both. The moment the violation ceases, the moment one comes into perfect harmony with the law, the cause of the suffering ceases, and though there may be residing within the cumulative effects of past violation, the cause is removed, and consequently there can be no more effects in the form of additions, and even the diseased condition that has been induced from past violation will begin to disappear as soon as the right forces are set into activity. There is nothing that will more quickly and more completely bring one into harmony with the laws under which he lives than this vital realization of his oneness with the Infinite Spirit, which is the life of all life. In this there can be no disease, and nothing will more readily remove from the organism the obstructions that have accumulated there, or in other words, the disease that resides there, than this full realization and the complete opening of oneself to this divine inflow. "I shall put my spirit in you, and ye shall live." The moment a person realizes his oneness with the Infinite Spirit, he recognizes himself as a spiritual being, and no longer as a mere physical, material being. He then no longer makes the mistake of regarding himself as a body, subject to ills and diseases, but he realizes the fact that he is spirit now as much as he ever will or can be, and that he is the builder and so the master of the body, the house in which he lives, And the moment he thus recognizes his power as master, he ceases in any way to allow it the mastery over him. He no longer fears the elements or any of the forces that he now in his ignorance allows to take hold of and affect the body. The moment he realizes his own supremacy, instead of fearing them as he did when he was out of harmony with them, he learns to love them. He thus comes into harmony with them, or rather, he so orders them that they come into harmony with him. He who formerly was the slave has now become the master. The moment we come to love a thing, it no longer carries harm for us. There are almost countless numbers today, weak and suffering in body, who would become strong and healthy if they would only give God an opportunity to do His work. To such I would say, don't shut out the divine inflow. Do anything else rather than this. Open yourselves to it. Invite it. In the degree that you open yourselves to it, its inflowing tide will course through your bodies a force so vital that the old obstructions that are dominating them today will be driven out before it. My words are life to them that find them, and health to all their flesh. There is a trough through which a stream of muddy water has been flowing for many days. The dirt has gradually collected on its sides and bottom, and it continues to collect as long as the muddy water flows through it. Change this. Open the trough to a swift-flowing stream of clear, crystal water, and in a very little while even the very dirt that has collected on its sides and bottom will be carried away. The trough will be entirely cleansed. It will present an aspect of beauty, and no longer an aspect of ugliness. And more, the water that now courses through it will be of value. It will be an agent of refreshment, of health, and of strength to those who use it. Yes, in just the degree that you realize your oneness with this infinite spirit of life, and thus actualize your latent possibilities and powers, you will exchange disease for ease, inharmony for harmony, suffering and pain for abounding health and strength. And in the degree that you realize this wholeness, this abounding health and strength in yourself, will you carry it to all with whom you come in contact. For we must remember that health is contagious as well as disease. I hear it asked, what can be said in a concrete way in regard to the practical application of these truths, so that one can hold himself in the enjoyment of perfect bodily health, and more, that one may heal himself of any existing disease? In reply, let it be said that the chief thing that can be done is to point out the great underlying principle, and that each individual must make his own application. One person cannot well make this for another. First let it be said that the very fact of one's holding the thought of perfect health sets into operation vital forces which will in time be more or less productive of the effect, perfect health. Then speaking more directly in regard to the great principle itself, from its very nature it is clear that more can be accomplished through the process of realization than through the process of affirmation, though for some affirmation may be a help, an aid to realization. In the degree, however, that you come into a vital realization of your oneness with the infinite spirit of life, whence all life in individual form has come and is continually coming, and in the degree that through this realization you open yourself to its divine inflow, do you set into operation forces that will sooner or later bring even the physical body into a state of abounding health and strength. For to realize that this infinite spirit of life can from its very nature admit of no disease, and to realize that this, then, is the life in you, by realizing your oneness with it, you can so open yourself to its more abundant entrance that the diseased bodily conditions, effects, will respond to the influence of its all-perfect power. This either quickly or more tardily, depending entirely upon yourself. There have been those who have been able to open themselves so fully to this realization that the healing has been instantaneous and permanent. The degree of intensity always eliminates in like degree the element of time. It must, however, be a calm, quiet, and expectant intensity, rather than an intensity that is fearing, disturbed, and non-expectant. Then there are others who have come to this realization by degrees. Many will receive great help and many will be entirely healed by a practice somewhat after the following nature. With a mind at peace and with a heart going out in love to all, go into the quiet of your own interior self. holding the thought, I am one with the infinite spirit of life, the life of my life. I then, as spirit, I, a spiritual being, can in my own real nature admit of no disease. I now open my body, in which disease has gotten a foothold. I open it fully to the inflowing tide of this infinite life, and it now, even now, is pouring in and coursing through my body, and the healing process is going on. Realize this so fully that you begin to feel a quickening and a warming glow imparted by the life forces to the body. Believe the healing process is going on. Believe it, and hold continually to it. Many people greatly desire a certain thing, but expect something else. They have greater faith in the power of evil than in the power of good, and hence remain ill. If one will give himself to this meditation, realization, treatment, or whatever term it may seem best to use, at stated times as often as he may choose, and then continually hold himself in the same attitude of mind, thus allowing the force to work continually, he will be surprised how rapidly the body will be exchanging conditions of disease and inharmony for health and harmony. There is no particular reason, however, for this surprise. For in this way he is simply allowing the omnipotent power to do the work, which will have to do it ultimately in any case. If there is a local difficulty, and one wants to open this particular portion, in addition to the entire body, to this inflowing life, he can hold this particular portion in thought. For to fix the thought in this way upon any particular portion of the body stimulates or increases the flow of the life forces in that portion. It must always be borne in mind, however, that whatever healing may be thus accomplished, effects will not permanently cease until causes have been removed. In other words, as long as there is the violation of law, so long disease and suffering will result. This realization that we are considering will have an influence not only where there is a diseased condition of the body, but even where there is not this condition it will give an increased bodily life, vigor, and power. We have had in many cases, in all times and in all countries, of healing through the operation of the interior forces, entirely independent of external agencies. Various have been the methods, or rather, various have been the names applied to them, but the great law underlying all is one and the same today. When the Master sent his followers forth, his injunction to them was to heal the sick and the afflicted, as well as to teach the people. The early church fathers had the power of healing. In short, it was a part of their work. And why should we not have the power today, the same as they had it then? Are the laws all that different? Identically the same. Why then? Simply because, with a few rare exceptions here and there, we are unable to get beyond the mere letter of the law into its real vital spirit and power. It is the letter that killeth. It is the spirit that giveth life and power. Every soul who becomes so individualized that he breaks through the mere letter and enters into the real vital spirit, will have the power, as have all who have gone before. And when he does, he will also be the means of imparting it to others, for he will be the one who will move and who will speak with authority. We are rapidly finding today, and we shall find even more and more as time passes, that practically all disease, with its consequent suffering, has its origin in perverted mental and emotional states and conditions. The mental attitude we take toward anything determines to a greater or less extent its effects upon us. If we fear it, or if we antagonize it, the chances are that it will have detrimental or even disastrous effects upon us. If we come into harmony with it by quietly recognizing and inwardly asserting our superiority over it, in the degree that we are able successfully to do this, in that degree will it carry with it no injury for us. No disease can enter into or take hold of our bodies unless it find therein something corresponding to itself, which makes it possible. And in the same way, no evil or undesirable condition of any kind can come into our lives unless there is already in them that which invites it, and so makes it possible for it to come. The sooner we begin to look within ourselves for the cause of whatever comes to us, the better it will be. For so much the sooner will we begin to make conditions within ourselves such that only good may enter. We, who from our very nature should be masters of all conditions, by virtue of our ignorance are mastered by almost numberless conditions of every description. Do I fear a draught? There's nothing in the draught, a little purifying current of God's pure air, to cause me trouble, to bring on a cold, perhaps an illness. The draught can affect me only in the degree that I myself make it possible, only in the degree that I allow it to affect me. We must distinguish between causes and mere occasions. The draught is not cause, nor does it carry cause with it. Two persons are sitting in the same draught. One is injuriously affected by it. The other experiences not even an inconvenience, but he rather enjoys it. The one is a creature of circumstances. He fears the draught, cringes before it, continually thinks of the harm it is doing him. In other words, he opens every avenue for it to enter and take hold of him. And so it, harmless and beneficent in itself, brings to him exactly what he has empowered it to bring. The other recognizes himself as the master over and not the creature of circumstances. He is not concerned about the draught. He puts himself into harmony with it, makes himself positive to it, and instead of experiencing any discomfort, he enjoys it, and in addition to its doing him a service by bringing the pure fresh air from without to him, it does him the additional service of hardening him even more to any future conditions of a like nature. But if the draught was cause, it would bring the same results to both. The fact that it does not shows that it is not a cause, but a condition, and it brings to each effects which correspond to the conditions it finds within each. Poor draught! How many thousands, nay, millions of times is it made the scapegoat by those who are too ignorant or too unfair to look their own weaknesses square in the face, and who instead of becoming imperial masters remain cringing slaves. Think of it, what it means. A man created the image of the eternal God, sharer of his life and power, born to have dominion, fearing, shaking, cringing before a little draught of pure life-giving air. But scapegoats are convenient things, even if the only thing they do for us is to aid us in our constant efforts at self-delusion. The best way to disarm a draught of the bad effects it has been accustomed to bring one is first to bring about a pure and healthy set of conditions within, then to change one's mental attitude toward it. Recognize the fact that of itself it has no power. It has only the power you invest it with. Thus you will put yourself into harmony with it, and will no longer sit in fear of it. Then sit in a draught a few times and get hardened to it, as everyone, by going at it judiciously, can readily do. But suppose one is in delicate health or especially subject to draughts. Then he be simply a little judicious at first. Don't seek the strongest that can be found, especially if you do not as yet in your own mind feel equal to it. For if you do not, it signifies that you still fear it. That supreme regulator of all life, good common sense, must be used here, the same as elsewhere. If we are born to have dominion, and that we are is demonstrated by the fact that some have attained it, and what one has done, soon or late, all can do, then it is not necessary that we live under the domination of any physical agent. In the degree that we recognize our own interior powers, then we are rulers and able to dictate. In the degree that we fail to recognize them, we are slaves and are dictated to. We build whatever we find within us. We attract whatever comes to us, and all in accordance with spiritual law, for all natural law is spiritual law. The whole of human life is cause and effect. There is no such thing in it as chance, nor is there even in all the wide universe. Are we not satisfied with whatever comes into our lives? The thing to do, then, is not to spend time in railing against the imaginary something we create and call fate, but to look to the within, and change the causes at work there, in order that things of a different nature may come, for there will come exactly what we cause to come. This is true not only of the physical body, but of all phases and conditions of life. We invite whatever comes, and did we not invite it, either consciously or unconsciously, it could not and it would not come. This may undoubtedly be hard for some to believe, or even to see at first. But in the degree that one candidly and open-mindedly looks at it, and then studies into the silent, but subtle and, so to speak, omnipotent workings of the thought forces, and as he traces their effects within him and about him, it becomes clearly evident and easy to understand. And then whatever does come to one depends for its effects entirely upon his mental attitude toward it. Does this or that occurrence or condition cause you annoyance? Very well. It causes you annoyance, and so disturbs your peace merely because you allow it to. You are born to have absolute control over your own dominion, but if you voluntarily hand over this power, even if for a little while, to someone or to something else, then you of course become the creature, the one controlled. To live undisturbed by passing occurrences, you must first find your own center. You must then be firm in your own center, and so rule the world from within. He who does not himself condition circumstances allows the process to be reversed, and becomes a conditioned circumstance. Find your center and live in it. Surrender it to no person, to no thing. In the degree that you do this will you find yourself growing stronger and stronger in it. And how can one find a center? By realizing his oneness with the infinite power, and by living continually in this realization. But if you do not rule from your own center, if you invest this or that with the power of bringing you annoyance or evil or harm, then take what it brings, but cease your railings against the eternal goodness and beneficence of all things. I swear the earth shall surely be complete to him or her who shall be complete. The earth remains jagged and broken, only to him who remains jagged and broken. If the windows of your soul are dirty and streaked, covered with foreign matter to them, then the world as you look out of them will be to you dirty and streaked and out of order. Cease your complainings. However, keep your pessimism, your poor unfortunate me, to yourself, lest you betray the fact that your windows are badly in need of something. But know that your friend, who keeps his windows clean, that the eternal sun may illumine all within and make visible all without, know that he lives in a different world from yours. Then go wash your windows, and instead of longing for some other world, you will discover the wonderful beauties of this world. And if you don't find transcendent beauties on every hand here, the chances are that you will never find them anywhere. The palm hangs on the berry bush. When comes the poet's eye? And the whole street is a masquerade when Shakespeare passes by. This same Shakespeare, whose mere passing causes all this commotion, is the one who put into the mouth of one of his creations the words, "The fault, dear Brutus, is not in our stars, but in ourselves, that we are underlings." And the great work of his own life is right good evidence that he realized full well the truth of the facts we are considering. And again he gave us a great truth in keeping with what we are considering when he said, "Our doubts are traitors, and make us lose the good we oft might win, by fearing to attempt." There is probably no agent that brings us more undesirable conditions than fear. We should live in fear of nothing, nor will we when we come fully to know ourselves. An old French proverb runs, "Some of your griefs you have cured, and the sharpest you still have survived. But what torments of pain you endured from evils that never arrived." Fear and lack of faith go hand in hand. The one is born of the other. Tell me how much one is given to fear, and I will tell you how much he lacks in faith. Fear is a most expensive guest to entertain, the same as worry is. So expensive are they that no one can afford to entertain them. We invite what we fear, the same as, by a different attitude of mind, we invite and attract the influences and conditions we desire. The mind dominated by fear opens the door for the entrance of the very things, for the actualization of the very condition it fears. "Where are you going?" asked an Eastern pilgrim on meeting the plague one day. "I am going to Baghdad to kill 5,000 people," was the reply. A few days later the same pilgrim met the plague returning. "You told me you were going to Baghdad to kill 5,000 people," said he, "but instead you killed 50,000. "No," said the plague, "I killed only 5,000, as I told you I would. The others died of fright." Fear can paralyze every muscle in the body. Fear affects the flow of the blood, likewise the normal and healthy action of all the life forces. Fear can make the body rigid, motionless, and powerless to move. Not only do we attract to ourselves the things we fear, but we also aid in attracting to others the conditions we in our own minds hold them in fear of. This we do in proportion to the strength of our own thought, and in the degree that they are sensitively organized and so influenced by our thought, and this, although it be unconscious both on their part and on ours. Children, and especially when very young, are generally speaking, more sensitive to their surrounding influences than grown people are. Sometimes veritable little sensitive plates, registering the influences about them, and embodying them as they grow. How careful in their prevailing mental states, then, should be those who have them in charge, and especially how careful should a mother be during the time she is carrying the child, and when every thought, every mental as well as emotional state has its direct influence upon the life of the unborn child. Let parents be careful how they hold a child, either younger or older, in the thought of fear. This is many times done unwittingly on their part, through anxiety, and at times through what might well be termed overcare, which is fully as bad as undercare. I know a number of cases where a child has been so continually held in the thought of fear lest this or that condition come upon him, that the very things that were feared have been drawn to him, which probably otherwise never would have come at all. Many times there has been no adequate basis for the fear. In case there is a basis, then far wiser is it to take exactly the opposite attitude, so as to neutralize the force at work, and then to hold the child in the thought of wisdom and strength, that it may be able to meet the condition and master it, instead of being mastered by it. But a day or two ago a friend was telling me of an experience of his own life in this connection. At a period when he was having a terrific struggle with a certain habit, he was so continually held in the thought of fear by his mother and the young lady to whom he was engaged, the engagement to be consummated at the end of a certain period, the time depending on his proving his mastery, that he, very sensitively organized, continually felt the depressing and weakening effects of their negative thoughts. He could always tell exactly how they felt toward him. He was continually influenced and weakened by their fear, by their questionings, by their suspicions, all of which had the effect of lessening the sense of his own power, all of which had an endeavor paralyzing influence upon him. And so, instead of their begetting courage and strength in him, they brought him to a still greater realization of his own weakness and the almost worthless use of struggle. Here were two who loved him dearly, and who would have done anything and everything to help him gain the mastery, but who, ignorant of the silent, subtle, ever-working and all-telling power of the thought forces, instead of imparting to him courage, instead of adding to his strength, disarmed him of this, and then added an additional weakness from without. In this way the battle for him was made harder in a threefold degree. Fear and worry and all kindred mental states are too expensive for any person, man, woman, or child, to entertain or indulge in. Fear paralyzes healthy action. Worry corrodes and pulls down the organism, and will finally tear it to pieces. Nothing is to be gained by it, but everything to be lost. Long-continued grief at any loss will do the same. Each brings its own peculiar type of ailment. An inordinate love of gain,